C.S. Lewis had an essay. He wrote a lot of things, but he had this essay that was talking about the three types of men in this world. There are three kinds of people, is what he said, basically. He said the first class is simply those that live for their own sake. They have their own pleasure. They regard man and nature as raw material that they can use for their own purposes. The second person is that has some claim upon them. In other words, some kind of burden that they feel like that they need to pursue. But this is the kind of pursuit that is an obligation. It's not one of get to. It's a great burden of that. And then there is the third class, he says, like Paul, which is to live as Christ. And that is what 1 John chapter 5 is talking about here in its first few verses. Now, he's been continuing this theme from chapter 4 of talking about the love of God, but he makes this great statement that we're going to get to today. Verse 5, chapter 1. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves his child as well. So this is that argument he was making against the Gnostics. Remember, they were the Gnostics with a G. They were saying that Jesus wasn't really God, but he was a spirit, wasn't really a person. Well, this is saying here, this is Jesus is born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves his child as well. Same thing as Jesus said, if you know me, then you know my Father. Okay? If you know my Father, you know me. This is how we know that we love the children of God, by loving God and carrying out his commands. So this is, again, continuing the idea of loving one another. This is the identifier for Christians, how we love one another. In fact, verse 3, here's where we get to the good part. It's all good, but here's where we get to the interesting part. This is love for God, to keep his commands. So before John said that they know our love by how we treat one another. They will know we are Christians by our love. But now he's saying there's another identifier, and that is to keep his commands. And here's the important part. And his commands are not burdensome. Think about this for a minute. We don't follow Christ because we have to. We follow Christ's commands because we get to. Because it's our love and it's our devotion. It's the things that we get to do to show our love for someone else. It's like marriage. Marriage is not a have to. Marriage is a get to. You get to marry and you get to serve this person for the rest of your life. It is a privilege. It is a pleasure. It is not a burden. I think too many times we as Christians, we look at the rules and the regulations and we unconsciously live in the burdensome lifestyle that we have to live and be this way and this way and that way. And we don't get the freedom in Christ. But freedom is Christ. Following Christ's commands is not a burden, it's a get to. For everyone, verse 4, born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. In other words, God has done everything and overcome everyone that we could possibly run into that could defeat us. Every bit of sin, every bit of anger, all the falling shorts, they've all been overcome. Who is it that has overcome the world in verse 5? Only the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. And that's it. And here's the cool thing about it. We don't have to do anything else. We don't have to follow commands. We don't have to do certain things. We get to. It's our way of showing our gratefulness, of showing our devotion, of showing our thankfulness to God. Our thankfulness to Jesus Christ and to what he's done and his unique spot, which we're actually going to talk about next time when we get into the whole water and blood and kind of go back to Nicodemus. But for this week, for today, you don't have to follow Jesus. You don't have to follow his commands. You get to follow Jesus. You get to follow his commands. It's the least we could do. After all, what he did for us was far greater and something that we could never, ever pay back. Gratitude for what he's done by getting to follow him. It's a good word.